Hey everyone, welcome to the studio sessions. Today we are joined by Tennille and we are going to be doing classic portraits with a single light. We've got a beautiful painted canvas backdrop set up behind us, which we will use for the shoot. And I will show you shortly the single light that we're going to use, how we're setting it up and why. And then following this, we are going to do an edit of these images, and I will show you step by step how these are edited so you can follow along and learn how to shoot and edit these portraits. Okay, so for this shoot, we are using my Ellen Chrome BRX 500s. You can do this with any lights, including speed lights or any other studio lights that you have. You can even do this with continuous light, so you don't need studio strobes like this. The important thing is it's not the light, it's the modifier. So as you can see, we're using a very large modifier. This is a 1.2 meter or 4 foot in Imperial. And this will give us really nice soft light. The other reason we're using this is because it's only one light. We want that light to fill the other side a little bit, but still give us that little bit of drama. So we're going to use this light, and the light is actually going to be placed almost in front of Tennille, extending all the way forward, so we get that light coming around a little, giving us that fill on the other side. So this light is going to be probably about 1 meter to 1.2 meters away from Tennille as well, which will give us, using the inverse square law, will give us nice wrap without being too contrasty. If we have the light too close to Tennille, it will give us really harsh contrast between the lit side and the dark side, which we don't want in this photo, especially since we're using the one light. So having the large light and having it a bit further away gives us really nice light on Tennille, and it also gives us really nice light on the background so that we don't need to use a second light to light the background. So as you can see on the other side of Tennille, I've set up a black card. This is to stop the light bouncing off the light colored walls and filling in a lot of the shadows where we're trying to create on the other side. So what this does is it takes a bit of that light away and it gives us a bit more contrast without overpowering the image. So the card is quite small. That is actually nothing more than some black foam core that I picked up at Officeworks. So it's nice, cheap, easy to use. It's clipped on with the to a lighting stand with just a clip, but you'll see the results it gives us are really good. So we're going to put that in place. We're going to meter it, and we're going to get some portraits. Turn your head towards the light. That's it. So here we are shooting with the D850 and the Sigma Art 85mm lens. The light was metered at ISO 100, f10 and 1/160th of a second. Couple more. And chin up a little. Beautiful. So as you can see, getting some amazing portraits is really easy, and you don't need a lot of gear. You don't need a lot of expensive gear. You don't need 4, 5, 6 lights. One light, one large modifier, and a black card from Officeworks, which costs us $2, is all you need to create these images. So let's take this into the edit now, and let's have a look at how these are edited and have a look at some final images. So see you then. Alright everybody, welcome back. So now that we're back in the studio, I'm going to do a quick tutorial on editing one of the images from the shoot you've just seen using Capture One. I use Capture One for all my editing, and it is fantastic. It gets me 99% of the way there. And I only would use Photoshop for things like skin retouching or any cloning that needs to be done just to really polish the image. So the image we're going to edit, you can see on the screen there, this is the final look that we are going for. And what I want to show you is this is the raw file that came straight out of camera. So this is completely unedited. As you can see, nothing's been applied, no color correction, no white balance, nothing. So the first thing we are going to do is set up a custom color profile with our color checker. Now, I've already done a video on the color checker, what it is and how it works, and I will link that in the description below. So here I'm just going to show you the workflow on how to incorporate it into editing images with Capture One. If you're a Lightroom user, it is a slightly different process, and I may do a tutorial at some point on using Lightroom. I personally don't use Lightroom, so I actually don't even have it installed on the computer, but I might do that just for completeness. But for now, this is going to be purely Capture One oriented. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the color profile. So this is their image with our color checker. So the first thing we're going to do, press C for crop. We are going to crop this down to our color checker. We want that nice and small, V to bring that up, and that is our color checker. Now, really important, in your color tab, which is here, if you come down to base characteristics, you can see that it picks it up that it's a Nikon D850, which is what I shot with an auto curve. When you click that once, click on show all, and then it brings up the full list, and it has all different camera profiles that come with Capture One. What we are going to do is we're going to go to Effect, and we're going to say No Color Correction, and then you're going to change the curve, and you're going to change that to Linear Response. And this is what we end up with. May not look all that flash, but that's okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call this ICC Profile, and we are going to hit Process, and this will basically exports our TIFF. Now the TIFF needs to be obviously be a TIFF, needs to be 16-bit, needs to be uncompressed. That is really important that those three things are done. From here, what we are going to do is we're going to open our calibration software. So this is the software that comes with the color checker from Xrite. Obviously, if you're using a different brand of color checker, you need the software. For me, because I'm using the Xrite color checker, it's the Xrite software. We make sure the ICC TIFF is selected. We then go to our output folder, and there's our ICC profile TIFF. Drag and drop, and then as you can see, that actually picks up where the color checker is. Needs a little bit of a tweak, which I'm going to do now, just to make sure that all the squares lined up with all the squares. There we go. There we go, just like that. And then we're going to do is create profile. So what we are going to do is I'm actually going to override this one, so we're going to replace it, and then what it will does is you just got to give it a name, and then this comes up as saving ICC profile. Now this will take a little while, so I'm going to come back when it's all done, but once it's all done, we do need to restart Capture One. So I'm just going to close that now while we're waiting for the profile to be done, and then we'll come back once this profile saved. Okay, so as you can see, it says the profile has been created successfully, and the application using the profile may need to be restarted. We already know that, which is why Capture One's been closed. So we click OK here, we close this, and we reopen Capture One. Okay, so now that Capture One is reopened, we don't need this image anymore. So we are going to come back to our image. So this is the raw file. It is completely straight out of camera. Like I said, it hasn't been color corrected, hasn't been edited or anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into this, essentially. And this is what this tutorial is about. So first thing we're going to do is, if you come over to the color tab, you can see here the ICC profile, which I've just shown you to make it that there's no color correction. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click here, we're going to click show all, then we're going to come back, and when we go to other, what you will find is these are all the ICC profiles that I've created, and Classic Portrait is the one we've just made. So you click Classic Portrait, and curve, you can select, there's basically the different curves are like different presets that come with Capture One. I actually like the portrait curve as opposed to the others, but this is just personal preference, so I will leave that up to you as to what you want to do. So we'll select portrait, and this is where we are starting. So straight up off the bat, we went from that to that, and I know you're thinking we've just lost all the contrasts and this looks really bad. But it's fine. We are going to fix all that, but at least now we know that all the colors in our image are accurate. So we'll come back to here. First thing we're going to do is we are going to fix the white balance. So I know I was shooting with my strobes, which are 5600 Kelvin, the daylight balanced. So I'm just going to type that in, and tint needs to be 0. And straight up our colors are looking a lot better than that. A lot better than what they were. Now what we're going to do now is let's add a bit of contrast in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit to say about there-ish. Bring the brightness up to, let's have a look, to about there, which is already making it look a lot better. What I am going to do using the levels is I'm going to bring the blacks down. So if you move this slider, you can see how the blacks shift. We're just going to add just a smidge, maybe about there-ish, and let's bring up the highlights a little, maybe to about there. About there is good. And then what I want to do is just bring up the overall brightness to that. So far we've gone from that to that. It's already looking much better, but we're nowhere near finished yet. So let's add just a little bit of an S-curve in, just to give it just a bit of a, give it a bit of extra punch. I might bring the contrast down. So most people crank the contrast, but as you can see, that's really making everything quite harsh. So I'm actually going to drop my contrast to around there, around -20, 21 will do. And then let's bring the saturation up just a smidge, just to give it just a little bit more color. Say about there. Maybe a bit less. There. I'm happy with that. So now that we've got there, we're getting the base looking sort of reasonably decent. One thing I'm going to add here is structure. Now, with clarity in Capture One, it's broken into clarity and structure. Clarity actually just brings up the contrast in the colors, so you can see the colors shifting. Structure just brings up almost like the sharpness. It brings up the detail. Now if you actually have a look at the necklace, if I zoom that in a little, if we bring structure up, you can see how the necklace just gets a lot more detail in it from 0. So what I'm going to do is just bring that up just to give that jewelry a bit of extra punch, maybe around there-ish. That looks good. And that is the base. That's where we're going to start with. So now let's take care of the skin. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go into the color tab. We'll create a new layer. So with Capture One, everything you do is going to be in layers. So we're going to call this skin tone. And then what we're going to do is in the color editor, we're going to use this skin tone option here. So we're going to pick the color, get the color picker, bring it to, say, pick a nice skin color there, and you can see that wheel's there. One thing to note, if you are following this along and you are trying to do this edit along with me, my color wheel probably looks very different to yours. That's because I've changed my settings to vector scope. So just very quickly, if you go to edit and preferences, and then you go to color, you can see the color wheel. By default, there you go, you can see it there as standard. I use vector scope. The reason I use vector scope is because I do a lot of photo editing but also video editing. So I prefer vector scope. The difference is really the way it's oriented. That line there at, say, 11 o'clock, that's your skin tone line. And that's just how I'm used to seeing the vector scope, which is why I like this view better. again, up to you how you prefer it. So we've selected the skin tone, which comes up here, gives you the range. So skin tone has two sections to it. One is uniformity, which basically just does the uniformity of the skin, and the other one is the overall look. So the first thing I actually want to do is I want to mask out the skin. And the reason we're going to mask out the skin is because the skin has a lot of reds in it. And unfortunately, the background has a lot of reds in it. So if we adjust the skin tones using this, it will actually affect our background as well. So the way we set up the mask is we get press B for brush. Using the square brackets, we'll make the brush bigger. If you press M, you can see the mask where we're drawing. And now if we actually paint that in, you can see the mask being painted in. The way I usually paint my mask is I sort of use a big brush to paint it in, and then I use a smaller brush to refine it as needed. And that works really well. So we'll just paint that in. Now, because the dress is blue and we're working with skin tones which have more reds than blues, you don't have to be super accurate where the skin meets the blue dress, but where the skin meets the background is really where you need to watch. So spacebar gives you the hand so you can move things around as well. So now we're going to make this smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly refine this mask. I'll fast forward this through so you're not sitting here watching me do this, and then I'm going to come back once the mask is refined. Okay, so one thing I didn't mention earlier is when you're doing this is obviously B is for brush, and as you can see the plus, so we're actually drawing. When you press E, it's the erase tool, and your pointer changes to a minus, and that actually deletes the mask. So the way you flick between the two tools is either B for brush or E for erase. So the mask is I've masked out the skin. Because the skin tone adjustments are very subtle, these little things don't make a lot of difference. You can, if you obviously if you really want to be precise, we can add these little bits of skin in as well, but it's not crucial, as you will see shortly. The other thing I am going to do with this image is I'm going to take the eyes and the lips out of this mask, and the reason for that is I don't want any of the adjustments changing. So obviously with the lips, we've got red lipstick and there's red in the lips. In the skin, sorry, so we definitely don't want that changing. And the eyes, I always just like to keep the eyes nice and clean and clear. So press M to turn the mask off, and everything's now masked. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fix up the skin tones a little bit. So what I'm going to do first of all is come over to my exposure here. So in color, you've got white balance here. Okay, we'll just stay in this tab. I've changed this a little bit. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to warm up the skin a little. So I'm going to bring up the white balance just a smidge, like to about there-ish. And again, because this is masked now, see if I change the white balance. That actually looks really cool. But anyway. All we're doing is we're changing the skin tone. So we're going to bring that to there. And now what I'm going to do is we are going to change. So uniformity basically makes the skin a lot more even looking. So if I bring hue all the way up, it basically matches all the color tones. Now, the changes are so subtle, I'm not actually sure if you'll be able to see that in in the video. You don't want to go all the way, otherwise the skin will start looking a bit unnatural. But if we bring the hue to about there-ish, saturation, again, what this doesn't, in the uniformity, this doesn't increase the saturation, it evens the saturation. So again, if I go all the way, if I go from one extreme to the other, it just basically fills in the colors a bit more. So sort of we'll put that about, say, here-ish. And then lightness actually changes, again, affects the, fills in a lot of the shadows as well. So we'll put that to about there-ish. If you can't see that in the recording, you'll definitely be able to see it when if you're doing this yourself. So with hue, I'm just, so here, it changes the whole thing. So you can see with hue, that's very red, that's very yellow. So we're going to, I'm just going to rebalance that just a little bit to about there to give us a nice skin tone. And lightness, we just, again, we can darken or lighten the whole thing. So I'm just going to lighten the skin just a bit to about there. So what you can see now, if I turn skin tones off, so this is basically just the skin tones layer now, and hopefully here you can definitely see the huge difference between what we had and what we have now, and the skin's actually looking really, really nice now, and I like that look. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to do the eyes. Eyes I always do separately, just to bring up a little more detail. So we'll create a new layer called eyes. So we zoom in, and again we need to mask this in. So pressing M, B for brush, using the square bracket makes it a bit smaller, and basically we color in just the eyes there, not the whites. M to make the mask disappear. Now with what I'm going to do with the eyes is I'm going to bring up the saturation to really make them pop. So you can see if I take the saturation out, they go quite gray. At maximum saturation, you know, they're very, look, you can see all the greens and the yellows coming out. But if we go to say about there-ish, and then what I'm going to do is using structure. Remember, structure sharpens the, now obviously that's a bit too much, but I'm going to use just a bit of structure here just to add a bit of sharpness to those eyes, probably about there. We don't want it too overpowering. So now if we turn eyes on and off, you can sort of see the difference. So it really makes those eyes pop. So next we're going to do is hair. Now hair is one thing I really like to do. It's not a lot that we do with hair, but I'll show you if we create a new layer. Oh, now one thing to note as well, when you create a new layer, there's no mask. So if you just create a new layer and you start changing things, like if I was to change exposure, you can see that nothing's happening. If you ever get into this situation, it's because if you press M, there is no mask. What you can do is if you right click on that, you can actually go fill mask, and now the entire mask is filled, which means that now if we change it, it changes the whole thing. So let's clear the mask because this is just about the hair. So we're going to come back to here, get our brush a bit bigger, and then using M, we're just going to paint in the hair. Now what I like to do with the hair is just add just a bit of, give it a little bit of punch. So if we bring that in, bring all that in, I'm just gonna, don't worry, I'll erase that in a sec just to fix that up, but just do a nice quick there, E for erase, and then take that off so it's just, we've just got the hair mask off. What I like to do with the hair is just add a bit of contrast. and what you can see is if you take contrast out, it makes it go really light. If you go really high contrast, it makes it really dark. So somewhere around sort of there-ish, that's really nice. Again, if we turn the layer off, that's before, that's after. It's a little subtle, and you don't want it too sort of overpowering, but you can see how it just adds just that little bit of contrast to it. So we've got the hair, we've got the eyes. Let's do the dress. Let's do the dress next, just to tweak it a little bit. So we'll create a new layer. We call this layer dress. Now, what we're going to do here, this is going to be really cool because the dress is blue and we have nothing else really blue in this whole image. What we can actually do to save a lot of time is fill mask, so that it's the entire image. But now if we come to the color tab and we use skin tone. Now skin tone is not just used for skin, and skin tone is basically a great tool because it gives you the uniformity in the amount, whereas here it just changes, say advanced, it changes the color across the whole thing. So if we now come to the skin tone editor, where we're in the dress layer, and then we pick a blue off the dress, and you can see now that the blue selected, whereas before we had the skin tones up in the reds and the oranges and a bit of the yellows. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change, bring the saturation up just to make it a bit more blue and make it pop a little, probably around there-ish. Change the lightness down just a smidge, just to darken it, just to give it a bit more contrast, probably around there. And then again, using our uniformity, I'm just going to bring up the hues just to about there, and saturation to about there. And that again, if we go before and after, that's before, that's after. Look how beautiful and blue that dress looks now, whereas here it's kind of got a bit more of a purpley tinge to it. So so that's our dress. That's our dress done. So again, if you want to see the before and after, this is what we started with, and this is where we are now. If you ever want to compare what you started with, if you hold down Alt, the Alt key or Option, I believe it is on the Mac, and click Reset while holding Alt, it actually shows you the before and after. Now if you let go of Alt, it will actually reset the whole image, but if you let go of the mouse, it brings you back to where you are. So, and you can use that with any tool. So color editor, see that's the little reset icon. Again, if you hold down Alt, you click, that's before, that's after. So you can actually compare each and every little tool. So next I'm going to now do is we're going to take care of the background. The background's nice, but it could be nicer. So we create a new layer. We're going to call this BG for background. And here, unfortunately, we have to mask this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the mask, and then actually I'll show you a little trick first. So remember with the skin tones, we already created a mask that covers the arms basically in the head, right? So what you can actually do when you come up to the BG, to the background layer, if you right click, you can actually copy mask from. And if you copy mask from the skin tone layer, it puts that straight automatically into our into this layer. And then all you need to do is press B for brush, make the brush bigger, and then we paint in the rest. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why am I masking out Tennille when I just said that I want to work on the background? And I'll show you. Now, while I'm doing this, I'm going to show you another really cool trick. So if I just do the rough outline, and again, remember we're going to clean this up later on. So this is just pretty much just the rough outline. Let's color in the hair as well. Now, as far as the inside of the dress goes, what you can do is when you come to the background layer, if you right click and click Fill Mask, what that will actually do, because we have a perimeter already set up, is it actually just fills everything in. Really quick shortcut. And then what we'll do is we'll just tidy this up a little. So we'll make that smaller. Just refine that just a smidge. And again, we're going to actually do another refinement shortly once we've actually made the adjustments to the background. So this needs to be close, but doesn't need to be like crazy precise, as you will see shortly. So let's just finish off this mask here. Now obviously I am going a bit faster than now this I painted in by accident, so we'll just get rid of this. So we'll paint that out, and again it's just easier, as you will see, just to do that. Then you hit brush and then you sort of fill that in. This is much quicker than constantly changing the brush size and fiddling with the brush sizes. So let's fill that into there. Right. Oh, and same with here. Bring the erase tool, get rid of the background in there. Then we'll bring up the brush, paint that in, paint in the arm. In the dress, and that is pretty much, it's rough, but it's good enough for what we're going to do next. Now what we need is, we obviously need the background to be masked because it's the background that we're doing. So again, right click on the BG and you click invert mask, and as soon as you do that, we have the whole background now masked and Tennille is not. Turn the mask off, and then let's make some changes. Now, believe it or not, for the background, I am actually going to use the skin tone again. So we're going to get the color picker. We're going to pick sort of a nice sort of mid tone that we've got here. Now, obviously, your background's probably going to be different, so these tools are going to work very differently. But that's basically what I'm going to do. Now, because everything's masked, we've got quite a color range going through here. And because we've got the background masked out, what I'm actually going to do is open that up to make the color range. So where the dot is where the color that I've picked. Where the semicircle now is, that's the range that's going, the color range that will be affected by all of this. And that's the little soft part. There's the smoothness, which is the blending, so it doesn't sort of look really obvious. 25 is the default, and 25 works really well. So what we're going to do here is we are going to take the saturation down just to make it a bit more dramatic. And then here we're going to bump the hue. We are going to bump the uniformity with the saturation to about there. And we'll sort of lighten it up a little to about there. So just remember, the uniformity just evens it out a little bit, whereas these values actually change it. So I can actually, using hue, completely change it, or using the lightness, make it darker or brighter, as you can see there. So once we've got it to there, I'm going to come back to the exposure tab. I'm going to boost our contrast to, I'm going to boost it quite a lot to about there-ish. I'm going to boost the overall saturation to about, so this is really dramatic now. Bring down the shadows a little bit to about there. Just bring down the blacks just a smidge. to about there-ish. And then we're just going to add just a bit of contrast to there, and then bring up the highlights just to bring that up a little bit to about there. So now our background, again, if we come back to our adjustments, if we go to before and after, the background's got quite a nice punch to it. Now, remember when I said before that this is really rough? So what you can see now is that little halo that we've got above the head. This is how we fix it. So using the brush tool and a really soft brush. So if you right click anywhere, you can it brings up the brush settings. What I do now is I bring the normally with the hardness I'm around 50%, bring it down to 0. So the brush is as soft as it's going to get. And then what we do is we just literally blend this in to make it quite seamless. And you can see there that entire halo is now gone. You can see a bit of a halo around the next to the arm here. So again, we'll bring that in. And because the brush is so soft, it just blends it so nicely that yeah, you can see the little haloing there. So we take a lot of that out. That's going to be too much. Let's take that off the brush. Okay, so this is quite a lot. You see how by using the soft brush here, it just blends it in so nicely without you spending hours trying to perfect the mask. Again here. Zoom that out and have a look. What's this? All looks good. Actually, all looks really good. Maybe just a little bit of a halo there. Take that off the hand. And that is pretty good. So you get the idea. So we are looking really, really good. And technically you could sort of finish up here. So if we go back to, oh, one thing I didn't actually show you is you can actually change the opacity of these layers. So with skin tone, that's what we started with. That's what we ended up with. Now, this side is a little bit bright for me. But obviously that was too dark. So if we we can actually blend this down a little bit, and it just gives us that nice little bit of a nicer sort of contrast to it all, which is really good. So if we now go through our layers, if I turn everything off, so we started with this, we color corrected to get this and added a few bits and pieces with contrast and brightness. We then fix the skin, we sharpen the eyes, we tweak the hair a little, we made the dress nice and blue, and we made the background nice and dramatic. Even with the background, we can sort of just pull that back a little bit. You know, that's really dramatic. Even if we just sort of go to around there, that's actually really nice. And technically you can really stop there. What I like to do and what I did with the original image, if we add another layer, oh, one other thing I want to show you is if you actually if you click on plus, it creates a new empty layer. Like I said, no mask. If you press M, nothing comes up. If you actually right click on the plus, you can actually do a new filled layer. And if you do a new filled layer and you now press mask, it's now all red. So it actually saves you the step of filling it. So what I'm going to do here is with this layer, if you actually right click on it, you can actually add styles. So you can buy styles and presets like you can with Lightroom here. You do get a handful that come with Capture One. What I really liked here is if you go to these built-in styles and go to IQ styles, this fashion just makes the whole thing really pop. So if we add this fashion preset to it, again, that's probably a little too much, so we can use the opacity of the layer to blend it in. Around there is really nice. And again, just looking at before and after, it just adds just that really nice color to it. So we'll call this grade. And then the other thing I've also done is if we do another filled layer, we'll call this grade 2. And what I did is, so obviously here, if you click on a layer, you can do all these adjustments, right? But if you actually come to any of the tools, like the color balance, for example, and you click the little, you click the presets, it actually shows you some presets. So again, if we roll over, it actually shows you, like if we go purple, it's purple punch, there's turquoise, there's bright gold, there's a lot of warms. Cool Look Zero actually works really well because of the blue dress, and it gives it that little bit more of that vintagey look. So adding that coolness to it, just, I mean, you can barely see it, but it's nice. So yeah, because Cool Look +1 just makes the skin look too blue. So that is our finished image. And then if we compare it to our original, so the original I did, it is a little bit darker because I've, tweaked things a little bit, but I like them both. So that's pretty much how you can do a full edit. Now, if I was actually wanted to take this all the way, I'd take this now into Photoshop. This little bit of floor that's showing here, clone that out and extend the canvas a little bit. Do very little skin touching, but it just very, very minor. We don't really need all that much. And that's their image done. So we are going now, just finally, this is the before, what we started with, and this is what we've come out with, and I think that's a really, really nice look. That's what I was going for, but again, I've sort of tweaked things a little bit different for this tutorial as opposed to the original one, but you can see how that's worked. So there you have it. So that is my take on this image. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you've learned a lot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link in the description below to the raw file of this image, so that you can download it yourself and you can either follow along and learn Capture One through that way, or you can actually play with all the tools and come up with a different look. This is my take of this image, but that doesn't mean it's the only look. And I would, to be honest, I would love to see some of you do completely different looks. And, if you do that, make sure you leave a link in the comments below so I can have a look at it, or just shoot me an email directly. But I would love to see what you've come up with and the different ways of editing this image. But hopefully this was helpful. And as always, thank you for watching. Leave a comment below with any questions, comments. Please subscribe. Press the bell icon if you've liked this and found this informative. And see you at the next video.